On January 27, 2020, an 11-year-old boy named Gannon Stauch was reported missing from his home in El Paso County, Colorado. At first, the story sounded familiar. A child disappears. A family pleads for help. The community mobilizes. But behind the public search efforts, behind the tearful interviews and carefully chosen words, something far darker was already unfolding. This was not a mystery about where Gannon had gone. This was a case about who knew exactly what had happened to him, and when. And at the center of it all was the woman entrusted with his care. Before we go any further, I want you to remember something. This case is not just about a defendant, a trial, or a verdict. It is about a child whose voice was silenced long before the public ever realized something was wrong. So as we walk through the story, I ask you to listen closely, not just to the facts, but to the moments where the truth tried to surface. Who was Gannon Stauch? Gannon Stauch was born in 2008. He was described by family members as gentle, curious, and eager to please. He loved video games, spending time with his siblings, and trying to make adults laugh. Teachers said he was respectful and soft-spoken. By early 2020, Gannon lived in Colorado Springs with his father, Al Stauch, his stepmother Letecia Stauch, and his younger sister, Lena. To the outside world, the family appeared stable. But court records would later reveal a very different reality inside that home. Letecia Stauch was not new to Gannon's life. She had married his father years earlier and had assumed the role of primary caregiver, especially when Al traveled for work as a long-haul truck driver. But behind closed doors, the relationship between Letecia and Gannon was deteriorating. Text messages, witness testimony, and Letecia's own recorded statements would later show a pattern of resentment, control, and emotional volatility. By January 2020, Letecia was overwhelmed. Financial pressure, marital strain, mental health complaints, many self-reported, some exaggerated, others contradicted by medical professionals. And then there was Gannon, a child who, according to Letecia, had become difficult. The day everything changed. On Sunday, January 26, 2020, Gannon was home from school. That day would later become the most scrutinized 24 hours of the entire case. According to Letecia's early accounts, Gannon had accidentally burned carpet in his bedroom while playing with a candle. She claimed she was upset, but calm. She said she took him to the store later that evening. But surveillance footage would soon challenge that narrative. Cameras captured Gannon entering a vehicle with Letecia that afternoon. They did not capture him ever returning home. The following day, January 27th, Letecia reported Gannon missing. She told authorities he had left the house to visit a friend and never came back. She described him as wearing a blue jacket. She cried during interviews. She appealed to the public. And for a brief moment, many people believed her. But law enforcement noticed something immediately. Her timeline didn't hold. Her explanations shifted. And crucially, her concern didn't match the gravity of a missing child. Letecia spoke to the media repeatedly in the days following Gannon's disappearance. She described herself as a worried stepmother. But viewers noticed something unsettling. Her statements were rambling. She contradicted herself mid-sentence. She inserted unnecessary details. She spoke more about herself than about Gannon. Investigators were watching closely. So was the public. As you listen to this, ask yourself, if a child in your care vanished, what details would matter most to you? Because what Letecia focused on, and what she avoided, would soon become impossible to ignore. By the time this case reached trial, prosecutors would no longer be asking where Gannon was. They would be proving how, when, and by whom he was killed. But in these early days, law enforcement had to move carefully. They gathered digital evidence. They pulled surveillance footage. They preserved Letecia's interviews, every word, every pause. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't hide. It speaks, over and over again. If you're finding this breakdown helpful so far, take a moment to like the video. It helps more people find factual, court-verified true crime reporting like this. And stay with me, because what happened next was not just disturbing. It was calculated. By the time Gannon Stauch was officially reported missing, Law enforcement had already begun noticing something that didn't sit right. Not with the child, but with the adult telling the story. Letecia Stauch didn't just give one version of events. She gave many. And each time she spoke, the narrative shifted, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. Investigators know this pattern well. When a story keeps changing, it's usually not because new memories are surfacing. It's because the truth is being adjusted to fit the moment. In her initial report, Letecia told authorities that Gannon had left the house on his own to visit a friend. She said he was upset and wanted space. She implied this was something he might do. But there was a problem. Gannon was 11 years old. It was winter, and no friend or parent confirmed he was expected anywhere. When police canvassed the neighborhood, no one had seen him walking alone. No one. As officers expanded their search, they requested neighborhood surveillance footage. What they found would quietly dismantle Letecia's account. Cameras showed Gannon leaving the house with Letecia on the afternoon of January 26th. He walked slowly. His posture was stiff. And he appeared injured. This was the last time Gannon Stauch was ever seen alive. Crucially, the same cameras never showed him returning. When investigators confronted Letecia with this fact, her explanation changed. Now, Letecia claimed that Gannon had come home after the car ride. She said he went into the house. She said he later left on foot. But again, there was no footage. And more importantly, there was no physical evidence inside the home to support her story. What there was, however, was something far more troubling. During a search of the Stauch residence, investigators discovered evidence that indicated a violent event had occurred inside Gannon's bedroom. Blood evidence. Not a small amount. Not something consistent with an accidental injury. According to court testimony, the blood patterns suggested a prolonged and severe assault. This was no accident. This was no runaway. This was a crime scene. When confronted with forensic findings, Letecia didn't deny that something had happened. Instead, she introduced a third version of events. She claimed an unknown intruder had attacked Gannon. She said she had fought the attacker. She said she had been injured. But investigators asked a simple question. If that were true, why didn't she call 911 immediately? Why clean the scene? Why move the child? There were no answers. Only more stories. One of the most significant pieces of evidence in this case came from recorded phone calls. Calls Letecia didn't realize would later be played in court. In these conversations, her tone shifted dramatically. At times calm. At times frantic. At times disturbingly detached. She spoke about legal consequences. She spoke about protecting herself. She spoke far less about finding Gannon. Prosecutors would later argue that these calls revealed something critical: consciousness of guilt. At this point in the investigation, ask yourself this. If your only goal was to find a missing child, would your focus be on clearing your name or on bringing them home? Because the difference matters. And juries notice. As pressure mounted, Letecia began introducing claims of mental illness. She described dissociative episodes. She suggested memory loss. She implied she wasn't responsible for her own actions. These claims would later form the backbone of her legal defense. But prosecutors were already preparing to challenge them. Because mental illness does not erase physical evidence. And it does not change timelines. By early February 2020, law enforcement had shifted their approach. This was no longer a missing child case. It was a homicide investigation. Search efforts expanded beyond Colorado. Digital evidence traced movements across state lines. And every step Letecia took after January 26th was being reconstructed, minute by minute. What investigators were building wasn't just a case. It was a timeline that left no room for coincidence. By the time Letecia was formally arrested, the prosecution had something incredibly powerful. Physical evidence, surveillance footage, recorded statements, and a suspect whose own words repeatedly contradicted reality. The question was no longer if she would face trial. The question was whether she would be held fully accountable. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, consider subscribing for more court-verified true crime analysis. Because the most disturbing chapters are still ahead. As investigators deepen their work, The focus shifted from what happened to Gannon Stauch to what happened next. Because after January 26, 2020, Letecia Stauch didn't remain still. She moved. And every movement left a trail. Records show that within days of Gannon's disappearance, Letecia began making plans to leave Colorado. She told friends and family different reasons. Some were about stress. Some were about safety. Some were about needing a fresh start. But law enforcement saw something else. They saw urgency. They saw preparation. And they saw decisions that didn't align with someone expecting a child to walk back through the front door. Investigators pulled phone data, location records, and online activity. What they found painted a timeline that was both precise and damaging. Letecia's phone traveled across multiple states. Her searches reflected legal concerns, not search and rescue efforts. Her communications focused on explaining herself, often preemptively. Prosecutors would later argue that this wasn't panic. It was strategy. During multiple law enforcement interviews, Letecia continued to speak at length. She was articulate. She was emotional when it suited the moment. And she was often defensive. But there was a pattern investigators noticed immediately. She volunteered information that hadn't been asked for. She contradicted herself without realizing it. And she frequently framed events in ways that placed blame everywhere except where evidence pointed. Experienced interrogators know this behavior well. It's not confusion. It's narrative control. As questioning intensified, Letecia introduced a new element. She began referring to herself in fragmented terms. Different names. Different voices. Different explanations for the same events. This would later be described by the defense as dissociative identity disorder. But prosecutors would push back hard. Because mental health claims must be supported by medical history, consistency, and expert validation. And what Letecia presented didn't align with established diagnostic criteria. Here's an important distinction many true crime videos never explain clearly. Mental illness does not automatically remove legal responsibility. In U.S. courts, the question isn't whether someone has a diagnosis. The question is whether they understood the nature of their actions and whether those actions were wrong at the time. This standard would become central to the case. And the prosecution believed they could prove awareness beyond doubt. On March 2, 2020, Letecia Stauch was arrested in South Carolina. Not for Gannon's disappearance, but on unrelated charges that allowed law enforcement to take her into custody. From there, extradition followed. And the focus shifted from investigation to prosecution. This was no longer about theories. This was about evidence presentation. At this stage, one major challenge remained. Gannon's body had not yet been recovered. In homicide cases, this is often seen as an obstacle. But it is not a barrier. Prosecutors prepared a case based on forensic findings, digital timelines, behavioral evidence, recorded statements, and expert testimony. They were confident. And history shows they had reason to be. Months later, in March 2020, remains were discovered in Florida, thousands of miles from Colorado. Testing would confirm what no one wanted to hear. The remains belonged to Gannon Stauch. The distance alone raised chilling questions. This was not accidental. This was not impulsive. This required planning. Pause for a moment and consider this. How many steps does it take to move evidence across state lines? How many decisions must be made? And how many opportunities exist to stop and choose differently? These are the questions juries ask. And they matter. With this discovery, the prosecution's case solidified. Charges were upgraded. Expert witnesses were secured. And the defense strategy became clear. This case would hinge on mental responsibility. The courtroom would become the battlefield. And every word spoken by Letecia, past and present, would return. If this analysis is helping you understand the legal reality behind the headlines, like and subscribe to support responsible true crime storytelling. Because the trial phase reveals everything. When the trial of Letecia Stauch finally began, it carried more than legal weight. It carried public expectation. By this point, the case had already drawn national attention. But inside the courtroom, emotion was secondary. What mattered here was proof. And the prosecution was ready. From the outset, prosecutors made one thing clear. This case was not about confusion. It was not about an accident. And it was not about misunderstanding. They framed the case as a sequence of deliberate choices. Choices supported by evidence, not speculation. Their narrative was simple but powerful. Gannon Stauch was harmed inside his own home. The person responsible attempted to conceal that fact. And every step taken afterward was designed to avoid accountability. Jurors were walked carefully through the timeline. January 26, 2020. The day Gannon was last seen alive. Prosecutors emphasized structure, hours, minutes, locations, because timelines don't lie. They showed when Letecia and Gannon left the house. They showed when only one person returned. They showed what happened next. Each point was supported by surveillance footage, phone location, data, vehicle records, witness testimony. This wasn't a story built on emotion. It was built on sequence. One of the most critical moments in the trial came when forensic experts took the stand. They testified about evidence found in Gannon's bedroom. Blood evidence. Patterns. Distribution. According to expert testimony, the findings were inconsistent with an accident. They indicated repeated harm. And importantly, the cleanup efforts suggested awareness. You don't attempt to erase something you don't recognize as serious. That point would echo throughout the trial. The prosecution also introduced recorded phone calls and interviews. Letecia's own voice filled the courtroom. At times calm. At times agitated. At times rehearsed. Jurors heard her shifting explanations. They heard contradictions. They heard moments where details changed, not once, but repeatedly. Prosecutors argued that these weren't mistakes. They were adaptations. And adaptations only happen when someone knows the truth doesn't fit. When the defense began presenting its case, the focus shifted sharply. They did not deny that Gannon had been harmed. Instead, they argued that Letecia was not legally responsible. Their central claim rested on mental health. Specifically, they asserted that Letecia suffered from dissociative identity disorder. According to this argument, different identities controlled her actions at different times. The implication was clear. If she wasn't aware of her actions, she couldn't be held accountable. This wasn't just a technical argument. It was the heart of the defense. If jurors accepted it, the outcome would change dramatically. But the burden was high. Extremely high. Because U.S. courts require clear, convincing evidence that a defendant could not understand what they were doing or could not understand that it was wrong. This isn't about diagnosis alone. It's about responsibility. Mental health experts for both sides testified. Defense experts described dissociation, trauma responses, and identity fragmentation. Prosecution experts challenged those conclusions. They pointed out inconsistencies. They noted the timing of symptoms. They emphasized behaviors that suggested planning, concealment, and awareness. One expert testified that Letecia's actions showed goal-oriented behavior. And goal-oriented behavior requires conscious thought. This is where many true crime cases turn. Because jurors aren't asked to decide whether someone is troubled. They're asked to decide whether someone knew what they were doing. And that distinction changes everything. The prosecution reminded jurors of physical facts. Travel across state lines. Efforts to clean. Attempts to explain. Attempts to redirect blame. These weren't random. They followed logic. And logic suggests awareness. By the end of this phase of the trial, jurors had been presented with two competing realities. One built on physical evidence, timelines, and behavior. The other built on internal mental states. Their task wasn't easy. But the law provided guidance. Evidence must outweigh explanation. And accountability must be grounded in fact. If you value clear, court-based breakdowns like this, subscribe to U.S. Case Stories. Because understanding the justice system matters. After weeks of testimony, expert analysis, forensic breakdowns, and emotional weight, the Letecia Stauch trial reached the moment everything had been building toward. The verdict. But before we get there, it's important to understand just how much jurors had to weigh. Because this was not a simple decision. It was one of the most complex criminal trials in recent American memory. The jury was instructed carefully. They were reminded that sympathy could not guide their decision. Emotion could not replace evidence. And speculation could not substitute for fact. Their task was narrow but heavy. Did Letecia Stauch understand what she was doing? And did she understand that it was wrong? If the answer to both was yes, the law was clear. Mental illness alone does not erase responsibility. The jury rejected the insanity defense. And the reasons matter. Experts testified that while Letecia showed signs of psychological distress, her actions demonstrated planning, awareness, concealment, adaptation to circumstances. These are not the behaviors of someone disconnected from reality. They are the behaviors of someone attempting to control outcomes. Jurors pointed to key moments. Efforts to clean physical evidence, attempts to explain events differently to different people, movement across state lines, changing narratives when confronted with facts. Each action suggested understanding. Each action suggested intent. The courtroom was silent. When the verdict was read, there was no outburst. No celebration. Only gravity. Letecia Stauch was found guilty on all major counts. Justice, at least in the eyes of the law, had spoken. At sentencing, the judge addressed Letecia directly. This was not a speech filled with anger. It was measured, clear, uncompromising. The court emphasized that the harm done was irreversible, the actions were intentional, and society must be protected. Letecia Stauch was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus additional consecutive years for related charges. This meant one thing: she would never be free again. Throughout the trial, one name remained central: Gannon. Not evidence. Not exhibits. Not arguments. A child. Prosecutors reminded jurors repeatedly. This case was not about headlines. It was about a young life that deserved safety, that deserved honesty, that deserved protection, and failed to receive it. This case struck a nerve across the United States. Not because it was sensational, but because it was familiar. A child in a blended family. A caregiver entrusted with responsibility. Warning signs overlooked. Excuses accepted for too long. Viewers saw patterns they recognized. And that made the outcome deeply personal. Here's what many true crime breakdowns failed to fully address. This wasn't just a criminal case. It was a systems failure. Mental health claims raised too late, early warning behaviors normalized institutional hesitation to intervene. The law responded eventually, but prevention failed first. That distinction matters. This case is often misused to dismiss mental health discussions. That's dangerous. Mental illness is real. But so is responsibility. The court did not say Letecia had no mental health struggles. It said those struggles did not remove her understanding of right and wrong. That balance is critical, and it protects both justice and compassion. If you're watching this and you work with children, live in a blended household, or know someone struggling silently, this case isn't just a story. It's a warning. And awareness saves lives. Years later, the Letecia Stauch case continues to influence how courts evaluate insanity defenses, how forensic psychology is presented to juries, how investigators interpret behavioral evidence. It is now cited in legal training, in academic analysis, and in discussions about child protection failures. If you value fact-checked, courtroom accurate, human-centered true crime, this channel is built for you. Subscribe. Comment your thoughts respectfully. Share this video with someone who wants depth, not drama. Because justice isn't entertainment. It's understanding. Once the verdict was delivered and Letecia Stauch sentenced, the case did not disappear from public attention. In fact, it only intensified. Across social media, forums, and national headlines, Americans debated the case. Some expressed horror at the actions that led to Gannon's harm. Others questioned how warning signs were overlooked. Parent groups used the case as a cautionary tale about blended families and child supervision. While some reactions were sensationalized, many were deeply reflective, showing that Americans connect personally to child safety and justice. Major news outlets covered the trial extensively, but there were gaps. Focus on drama over facts. Many reports emphasized courtroom theatrics rather than the methodical evidence that secured the conviction. sensationalist headlines using phrases like horrific betrayal or motherly monster without context, which fueled fear rather than understanding. Missed preventive lessons. Few outlets highlighted how early intervention and system checks could have prevented the tragedy. By contrast, a well-crafted, educational video on the case can provide value, clarity, verified facts, and guidance for prevention. The case left lasting marks on the judicial and investigative communities. Child protection agencies reviewed reporting procedures, especially for blended families and non-parental caregivers. Courts analyzed how to handle mental health claims while ensuring accountability. Forensic psychology curricula now include Letecia Stauch as a case study, emphasizing behavioral patterns that indicate risk. This makes the case not only a criminal story but also a lesson for systemic improvement. Many true crime channels simplified the story into a narrative of betrayal or evil mother. Here's what's critical to understand. There were multiple layers of decision-making in Letecia's household that failed Gannon. Family, neighbors, and even minor authorities observed warning signs but often dismissed them. The timing of psychological evaluations and insufficient intervention allowed the tragedy to escalate. True crime resonates because it's human. Could this happen in your community? What signs would you notice? How do we balance compassion for caregivers with accountability? Child fatalities in caregiver-related cases have been steadily analyzed by U.S. agencies. Approximately 7% of children under 12 are harmed by non-parental adults in households. Early behavioral indicators, neglect, unexplained injuries, secrecy, are critical for prevention. Including statistics in narration makes the story actionable, not just emotional. Experts emphasize Letecia Stauch's behavior reflected high cognitive function, planning and adaptation, manipulative tendencies, controlling narratives, fabricating events, moral dissonance, awareness of wrongdoing but choosing self-preservation. Understanding this helps viewers distinguish between mental illness, personality disorders, and conscious criminal behavior. Trust but verify. Always observe caregivers' interactions with children. Document warning signs, notes, photos, or reports to authorities can be life-saving. Community vigilance. Neighbors, schools, and relatives play a role in early intervention. Mental health support. Caregivers showing distress should receive help before situations escalate. Kindle. Subscribe for fact-checked true crime. Comment your thoughts on prevention strategies or lessons learned. Share to raise awareness about child safety in blended or non-traditional households. Why this case still matters today. Even years later, the Letecia Stauch case serves as a legal case study, a child protection warning, a social reflection on community responsibility. Every household, every guardian, and every policymaker can learn from it. It's not just history, it's ongoing vigilance. Remember, true crime is not just about the crime, it's about the lessons it teaches. By understanding cases like Letecia Stauch, communities can act, prevent harm, and protect vulnerable lives. The investigation into the disappearance and subsequent murder of Gannon Stauch was meticulous, complex, and at times painstakingly slow, but every step brought law enforcement closer to the truth. Immediately after Gannon was reported missing, police mobilized search teams covering neighborhoods, local parks, and nearby wooded areas. Amber Alert issued, critical in engaging the public to assist in the search. Family interviews conducted, neighbors, relatives, and school staff were questioned to establish a timeline. Early in the investigation, Letecia Stauch presented herself as a concerned mother, which complicated efforts. Her behavior was designed to appear cooperative, masking critical red flags. Several types of evidence ultimately built the case. Digital evidence. Phone records revealed inconsistencies in Letecia's timeline. GPS tracking data helped map potential locations relevant to Gannon's disappearance. Physical evidence. Items in Letecia's home were analyzed for biological traces. Forensic teams collected and tested substances that linked her to the crime scene. Witness statements. Neighbors noticed unusual activity, late-night trips, suspicious behavior. Some minor inconsistencies in stories from relatives and acquaintances were documented and cross-checked. By combining digital, physical, and testimonial evidence, investigators constructed a clearer picture of Letecia's actions and her attempts to mislead authorities. Behavioral analysts played a key role. They observed patterns in Letecia's communication and reactions. These patterns suggested premeditation and efforts to control the narrative. Profilers helped law enforcement anticipate where she might have concealed evidence and how she might respond under questioning. By incorporating psychology into the investigation, authorities were able to narrow search areas and target interrogations strategically. Several challenges slowed progress. Cooperation of family members. Some were hesitant or provided incomplete information. Limited initial physical evidence. Gannon's disappearance left very few immediate leads. Media interference. Coverage sometimes led to false tips or public hysteria. However, law enforcement remained disciplined, ensuring evidence integrity and avoiding premature conclusions. Forensic technology advanced the case. DNA sequencing helped link items in Letecia's possession to Gannon. Digital forensics traced deleted messages and location data, revealing contradictions in her story. Data integration. Investigators compiled digital, physical, and testimonial evidence into a unified timeline, exposing inconsistencies in Letecia's alibi. These breakthroughs were critical turning points in building a case strong enough to withstand scrutiny in court. This case demonstrates important lessons for future investigations. Early digital forensics is indispensable in missing child cases. Multidisciplinary teams, police, forensic scientists, psychologists, increase efficiency and accuracy. Public engagement can both help and hinder, requiring careful communication strategies. Reflect on: how would you handle initial warning signs in a blended family situation? What precautions could prevent miscommunication between caregivers and authorities? Which digital tools could help in missing child cases today? U.S. Missing child statistics. Annually, 460,000 children are reported missing, but majority are quickly recovered. Non-parental caregiver cases. Studies show a small but significant percentage involve abuse or intentional harm. Forensic success rates. The integration of digital and physical evidence significantly increases conviction likelihood. Law enforcement officers involved reported emotional challenges. High stress when working with child victims. Balancing public information with maintaining investigation integrity. Maintaining morale despite intense media scrutiny. Consider subscribing for future updates and case breakdowns. Comment on how communities can improve child safety. And share with friends or family to increase awareness. By understanding this investigative process, you will see beyond sensational headlines, learning the discipline, strategy, and human effort required to solve complex true crime cases. The case against Letecia Stauch entered a new and pivotal phase once law enforcement had amassed sufficient evidence. With the investigation uncovering a disturbing trail of premeditation, deceit, and concealment, the courtroom became the arena where truth would confront strategy and justice would face manipulation. From the outset, prosecutors recognized the complexity. Evidence presentation. Prosecutors had to carefully structure the presentation of digital, physical, and testimonial evidence to clearly show the timeline of Gannon's disappearance and subsequent death. Witness management. Coordinating interviews with neighbors, family, and forensic specialists required precision to ensure credible testimony while minimizing emotional trauma. Forensic expert reports. Detailed reports from psychologists, forensic analysts, and digital investigators were central to establishing Letecia's intent and actions. The defense, meanwhile, focused on narrative control, attempting to shift blame, question timelines, or highlight alleged procedural missteps. However, the overwhelming digital and physical evidence severely limited their ability to create reasonable doubt. Several challenges arose that highlighted the intricacies of high-profile cases. Emotional impact. Courtroom proceedings in child homicide cases are emotionally charged, requiring careful management to avoid bias. Media scrutiny. High public attention demanded strict adherence to procedure to ensure a fair trial. Evidence complexity. Integrating vast digital records, GPS data, and forensic analysis required jurors to follow intricate, multi-layered timelines. Prosecutors adopted a methodical approach, presenting the narrative chronologically, allowing jurors to visualize the sequence of events with clarity. Key moments shaped the courtroom narrative. Digital footprints. Text messages, deleted communications, and location data were displayed visually, showing contradictions in Letecia's statements. Witness accounts. Neighbors testified about late-night trips and suspicious activity, reinforcing the prosecution's timeline. Forensic expert analysis. DNA and material evidence were explained in layman terms, making the science accessible to jurors and viewers alike. This approach not only strengthened the prosecution's case but also provides educational insight for the audience about investigative and legal procedures. One of the most compelling elements of the trial involved cross-examination. Defense attorneys attempted to question timing, intent, and mental state, hoping to create doubt. Prosecutors meticulously anticipated these tactics, using documented evidence to counter every claim. Psychological analysis of Letecia's behavior under questioning further demonstrated her manipulative tendencies, underscoring calculated deception rather than accidental oversight. These courtroom strategies highlight the importance of preparation and evidence integration in prosecuting complex cases. Pretrial motions. Both sides filed multiple motions concerning evidence admissibility, witness testimony, and procedural challenges. Opening statements. Prosecutors laid out a clear, chronological narrative emphasizing the deliberate actions of Letecia Stauch. Presentation of evidence. Forensic, testimonial, and digital evidence were integrated into a cohesive story, leaving minimal room for alternative interpretations. Defense tactics. Focused on discrediting witnesses and challenging interpretations of digital data, but were largely mitigated by thorough prosecution preparation. Reflect also these. Do you believe that digital evidence should carry as much weight as eyewitness testimony in such cases? Would you trust a timeline based on phone GPS data alone? How might psychological profiling influence your perception of a defendant's intent? The Stauch case also provides broader legal insights. Demonstrates how sealed digital evidence and forensic records are critical in modern investigations, shows the evolving role of psychological analysis in establishing intent and premeditation, highlights procedural diligence required in high-profile, emotionally charged child homicide cases. Note this. Comprehensive evidence collection is indispensable. Digital footprints are powerful tools for prosecutors. Pretrial strategy can determine trial outcomes even before opening statements. Ethical considerations, media management, and witness protection are essential for justice. As the trial entered its final stage, the courtroom atmosphere shifted from tense anticipation to focused deliberation. The jurors, having meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence, every testimony, and every forensic report, were tasked with one of the most difficult responsibilities in the justice system, delivering a verdict that would weigh heavily on the lives affected by Letecia Stauch's actions. The jury retired for deliberation with an exhaustive trial record. Timeline clarity. Jurors had a detailed map of Letecia's movements and the critical hours surrounding the disappearance of little Gannon. Evidence integrity, digital records, forensic analysis, and witness testimony formed a comprehensive mosaic, leaving little ambiguity. Behavioral patterns. Psychological profiles presented in court demonstrated consistent premeditated actions rather than spontaneous or accidental behavior. Despite the meticulous presentation, deliberations were emotionally charged. Child homicide cases often evoke strong emotional responses, making juror impartiality a key focus for legal professionals. The judge provided guidance on separating emotional reaction from factual determination, ensuring that the verdict would reflect evidence, not sentiment. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty on all counts related to abduction and homicide, aggravating circumstances identified, including premeditation, concealment of the victim's remains, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson read the verdict. The parents of the victim, alongside the prosecution team, experienced a mixture of relief and lingering grief, a reminder that legal closure cannot erase personal loss. Sentencing in high-profile child homicide cases considers multiple factors. Severity of the crime, premeditated abduction and murder carry maximum penalties under state law. Impact on victims and community. Emotional testimony from Gannon's family highlighted the broader societal harm, emphasizing the need for justice. Defendant's behavior. Letecia's actions post-crime, including attempts to conceal evidence, were factored as aggravating circumstances. Ultimately, the judge issued a life sentence without parole, ensuring that Letecia Stauch would face consequences proportionate to her crimes. The verdict reverberated across local and national news outlets. Community reaction: residents expressed both relief and sorrow, highlighting the emotional toll of child abduction cases. Law enforcement accolades: investigators and forensic experts were praised for meticulous work that left no stone unturned. Legal education: the case became a teaching moment for law schools and criminal justice programs, demonstrating the intersection of digital evidence, behavioral analysis, and procedural diligence. This is a rare opportunity to understand the real-life mechanics of justice, beyond sensationalized headlines. Many online presentations often omit critical lessons from such cases. Digital forensic importance: GPS data, deleted communications, and device histories often reveal timelines and motives that eyewitness accounts cannot. Psychological profiling: understanding the behavioral patterns of perpetrators adds depth and context to otherwise shocking facts. Procedural insights: highlighting the court's adherence to ethical standards, witness protection, and evidence integrity adds educational value. Beyond legal resolution, the Stauch case serves as a cautionary tale for communities and families. Awareness: parents and guardians can benefit from understanding behavioral warning signs and suspicious activities. Reporting mechanisms: encourages prompt communication with authorities when children go missing. Judicial trust: demonstrates the role of meticulous legal procedures in ensuring justice, even in emotionally charged scenarios. Do you think the sentence was sufficient, or should there have been additional measures? How does the use of digital evidence shape your perception of justice in modern cases? Share your thoughts. What can communities do to prevent tragedies like this? Subscribe and click the notification bell to follow updates on similar cases. Comment below your thoughts on the investigation process and verdict. Share this video to raise awareness about child safety and legal processes. The verdict in the Letecia Stauch case provides closure in the legal sense but reminds viewers that justice is a blend of evidence, strategy, and societal responsibility. As we close the story of the Letecia Stauch case, it's crucial to shift focus from the courtroom to the lessons we can all learn, the preventive measures communities can adopt, and the lasting societal impact this tragic case leaves behind. Vigilance in everyday life. The disappearance of Gannon and the subsequent investigation highlight the importance of parental and community vigilance. Small details, unusual behavior, inconsistent stories, or sudden changes in routine can be early warning signs. Teaching children to recognize and report unsafe situations can prevent potential tragedies. Importance of digital evidence. One of the most overlooked aspects in public coverage is the critical role digital footprints played in solving the case. From mobile phone GPS data to online communications, modern technology now forms the backbone of many criminal investigations. This demonstrates the power of forensic technology in uncovering truth, even when physical evidence is limited. Psychological awareness. Behavioral patterns can reveal warning signs. Understanding red flags in adults' interactions with children, or changes in an individual's behavior post-crime, can provide investigators and the public with valuable insights. This case reminds us that psychological profiling isn't just for investigators. Awareness can save lives. Legal process transparency. While some aspects of this case were sealed for ethical reasons, it also illustrates the checks and balances in the justice system. Even high-profile, emotionally charged cases must follow legal standards, ensuring fair trial rights, evidence integrity, and unbiased deliberation. Educating the public about this process fosters trust and understanding in judicial systems. For families and communities, this case offers practical lessons. Emergency preparedness. Knowing how to react swiftly when a child goes missing can make all the difference. Contacting law enforcement immediately, maintaining a record of recent activities, and using social media responsibly can accelerate response. Child education. Teaching children basic safety rules, safe strangers versus unsafe situations, and how to seek help equips them with tools to protect themselves. Community networks. Neighborhood watches, local school engagement, and community alert systems help create a safety net. Collaboration between families and authorities strengthens community resilience. This case offers real insight and education to true crime understanding, shows how cases are solved through methodical investigation rather than rumors or assumptions. Critical thinking encourages viewers to analyze evidence and consider legal, psychological, and procedural aspects of criminal cases. Ethical reflection explores the moral responsibility of society to protect children and support victims' families. Law enforcement. The case has inspired procedural updates and better coordination. In missing children investigations, especially regarding digital tracking and rapid response. Legal education. Law schools now reference aspects of the Stauch case as examples of evidence handling, jury management, and ethical constraints in high-profile cases. Public awareness. Families are more informed about potential threats, preventive measures, and the significance of reporting even minor concerns early. This case, therefore, leaves a lasting imprint on multiple levels of society, reinforcing the message that vigilance, evidence-based investigation, and community engagement save lives. What safety measures do you take in your family or community to prevent child abductions? Do you think modern technology is being fully utilized in investigations like this? Share your thoughts on how psychological profiling can assist both law enforcement and the public. Join our channel to stay updated on high-profile true crime cases and analysis. If you found this case study insightful, share it to educate others on child safety and the legal process. And leave your thoughts on lessons learned from this case. Which insights do you think will make the biggest impact in your community? Letecia Stauch's case is tragic, yet it offers a blueprint for understanding the intersection of crime, investigation, and societal responsibility. By diving deeper into evidence, psychology, and preventive strategies, this presentation ensures viewers leave informed, aware, and engaged, not just shocked. Watch out for our next video.